this evening. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and members of the public and the media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussion taking place this evening. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would like to check with the committee. Those in attendance, please to make sure your mobiles are switched off, on silence, whatever you want to do, so they don't disturb the meeting. Thanks. And it would be appropriate, as usual, please, to start this meeting with 72 seconds silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Join me in 72 seconds. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we now move on to the agenda before us this evening. Item number 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. We have a full committee here, so I have not received any apologies for absence, which is good. Thank you all for being here. Item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have an interest to declare? Declare before about your membership of the PSAA. So we now move to item number 3, minutes of the previous meeting. There are some amendments to these minutes, aren't there? And if the committee is happy, you've got a copy of the minute. There are 2 or 3 amendments to be made which are not in here. So if the committee is happy, those amendments will be made. Then I think they're minor amendments, aren't they? Really?
And also actions in the action log.
Yeah.
I think that was
so some things that need to appear in the action log. So the committee is happy; they will be amended, and I will sign a copy of that on Monday after they've been amended. Committee on. Great. Thank you very much. So let's now move on to item number 4, which is a 6-month progress report. Changing the order of the agenda. That's it. Yes, yeah, okay. So item number 4, which is a 6-month progress report of the Equalities and EQIA audit recommendations. Joe and Jamie, you're going to present that to us, aren't you? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hargreaves. And I'll start, if that's okay, and then pass over to Jamie to talk about some of the HR and OD aspects. So the committee will remember this was an audit that we received in September 2025, which received limited assurance and made 12 really helpful recommendations about how we can strengthen our approach to EQIs and equalities across the council. I just wanted to say a couple of things. Firstly, that the audit started with a specific focus on EQIAs and the completion of EQIAs, but actually I think it made some very helpful broader recommendations, not just around kind of compliance with EQIAs and the technical form, but broader questions about culture and the way we were considering some of the equalities data in our decision making. And I think this challenge, there was a lot in the audit. The recommendations are ambitious and rightly so. But I think it's not just a technical fix, a technical challenge for the council. It is an adaptive one about making sure that we are routinely considering equalities as part of our decision making and as part of our service planning and service delivery. And that is a big challenge, and that is something that the audit recommendations we feel are very helpful in helping us to deliver on. We try to strike a balance in both in this report and in the actions we've taken in the last 6 months between kind of pragmatic actions that we can get on with, but recognising that this isn't a quick fix and that this will need a longer term approach. I'd highlight a few things. I think firstly, the work that we've done with colleagues in governance and elsewhere across the council to make sure that we are considering inequalities considerations at the earliest possible stage of decision making. So thinking about decision making that's coming up, decisions that are coming up through the pipeline, through the forward plan, and making sure that equalities considerations are factored into those decisions. The second is, I think, some quite creative, slightly delayed due to the cyber attack, but some quite creative work on the new form. There is no statutory obligation to complete an EQA form. What there is a statutory obligation to consider the equalities implications routinely in decision making. And I think that distinction is important because sometimes we get hung up on filling a form and ticking boxes, whereas actually we want to make sure that the form is eliciting the right kind of information from officers and is allowing officers to give members really robust advice about the likely impacts, known or unknown, of a decision. This all comes down, as I think we've said before, with this committee and certainly with the Open Scrutiny Committee, to data. The quality of data across the council is, I think, still sort of inconsistent. It's patchy in some areas, it's very good, and you see some examples of EQIAs which really make the best use of the data that services have to understand the potential impact of a decision on the communities that we serve. But I think that's not yet true across the piece, and what we're thinking about through the new EQIA form is ways to encourage people, to give people ideas, I guess, about the kinds of data they might use and where they might find them. And the final one is monitoring. I think it's all very well for us to complete EQIs at the point of a decision, but then it's understanding, as with many aspects of public service, the equalities impact of a given decision are not known often in advance, and so the really important thing is to keep monitoring them and to return to them at regular intervals and understand whether they are having the impact that's desired. And I think the only thing I would say is that this work, I think, has taken on an additional and sort of enhanced importance given some of the decisions that the council will have to make in light of some of the funding challenges that we face, where it will be all the more important to understand the impacts of decisions we're making about new policies, new strategies or changes to service delivery. But I'll hand over to Jamie to talk about the HR aspect. I think it's just worth saying that this is a corporate strategy of an HR audit, but actually it really does speak to activity right across the council. So Jamie and I have a role in trying to make sure that that is embedded across the piece.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've set the scene really clearly there. So I think I'll probably go into some of the specifics from an HR perspective. I think our focus has really been on strengthening both capability and consistency across the organisation. We are seeing a noticeable improvement in the quality of EQIAs that come forward now, which is really helpful. But like everything, it's really about maintaining that momentum and making sure that our teams and people leaders are really giving it the attention that it really does deserve. Alongside this, we're taking steps to embed in the right knowledge and behaviours across the organisation as well. At the same time, we've introduced a new EDI induction for new staff, alongside ongoing and refreshed training offers to help educate our people a lot more. And we're working towards specifically training line managers as well. We have prioritised creating practical support mechanisms to support staff. So this includes a regular ED&I and EQI help desk, which will be embedded from next month, and also setting up the facility of a network to have EQIA champions in local business areas so that people can go to those individuals to seek guidance and clarity around the process and really embed that culture of the importance of the EQIA framework. We strengthened the infrastructure that underpins this work, including clear guidance and governance for staff networks. There's been some ambiguity around that previously, so hopefully now that gives the really clear guidance that networks really do need to help make sure they're running those networks effectively. But overall, the focus has been on putting in place the right foundations, building capability and improving tools and strengthening support. But similar to what Joe has said, this is a really big challenge. My team have absolutely given it the attention that it needs, but there's still some way to go to make sure we maintain momentum in this space. Thanks.
Good, thank you, and thank you for coming back to this. It's quite detailed. And when I was reading it, there's lots of stuff I kept on reading. In progress, and one has to remember this only 6 months into a report, so one wouldn't expect a lot of these initiatives, which are quite big initiatives, to actually have been completed, if ever they are completed as such. So thank you very much for this report. I think you've answered a degree of issue there that I think is important on these things. And often these initiatives start with a lot of enthusiasm, and we get committees together. And really, the question is, isn't it? And we'll not know this yet. Is how we sustain this next year, the year after, and in 5 years' time. Once new people come on board and maybe and other issues have taken over as the issues of the moment, because this is a crucial one, isn't it? And we can't let it go. So I was encouraged with the stuff you put in there. And the other one I was thinking about is how far down the organisation this goes. Our managers brought in our the training, and there's lots there on training, so it's quite good. Interesting, maybe at some stage to look at members and what we're doing. We've got a new intake of members in a couple of months, and I think that's important that they, whatever their own views on this type of thing, it actually is important to the council as something that we have to take as members. We have to take seriously. So jolly good step there, but throw it open to the committee. All right.
Actually, just to pick up on that question, do members also get training as well as staff on equalities duties?
We've certainly done training for members in the past, but I think it's a really good challenge, and actually not just about public sector equality duty, but also how to look at some of the information presented in the equalities impact assessment, whether draft or final, so that members can use it to inform decision making in the way that it's intended to, and can ask questions and challenge it where they don't think it's complete. So we can certainly take that away. We've done all council sessions on equality, diversity and inclusion more generally before, but I think it would be helpful to focus on.
People do, as you say, sometimes get a bit confused and think it's just about the form.
Yes.
And possibly don't know the statutory duties.
Also, I find often in the past, not now, of course, but in the past, you read key decision, and the last paragraph is equalities in. I think I've read that now. I don't actually. We need to almost. I understand why it goes at the end, but it shouldn't go at the end. If you know what I mean. Intellectually, it shouldn't go at the end.
I agree with that. So just to give an example, we go through a business case process where perhaps a restructure is happening in the organisation. Historically, EQIA has been at the very end of that.
Yeah.
But if we were to move that at the top, so actually gets the focus early on, I think that would be really impactful. And we've definitely seen a change in that, where perhaps previously it was coming at the very end, but we've been encouraging teams now to really think about that at the very beginning. Make it a live document, yes, but it is an ongoing kind of form of initiative that needs to be done throughout that process.
And do we select committees, and you members here sit on committees, do we give it due process and due attention at select committees?
I don't particularly that we do, and I was just looking through because I'm sure there's one in this where it just says there are no equalities impacts, and it isn't clear on that old statement what that's based on, and we have to take it as read.
So I think it's fair to say it is in the paragraphs, and I know we expressly asked one to go in on a communities paper recently because it was missing when we saw the draft paper. In terms of councillors then addressing it with officers in meetings, no, I don't think it does, and I certainly think it would be beneficial to have some unpicking of that. I asked a question now because one of my challenges with this is, I think, putting all the measures in place as regards the assessment and the implementation is good, but actually what you then do with it is actually critical. And I feel that sometimes people, they do the tick box, but actually, I mean, I've seen it with TfL where you're going, in their decision, they say, yes, actually, we recognise people are going to be affected, but we're still pressing ahead. And you're kind of going, actually, there are better ways that you can either take on some of those changes. But I wonder to what extent we're putting the first half in place, but we're not putting the second, which is actually what do you do with the information and how do you really make a difference with it?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Gardner. And I think that is part of the reason we are encouraging in terms of that pipeline of decision making when we know things are coming. Part of the reason we're having that conversation about equalities impact assessment earlier is, I guess, to make sure that those sorts of things are picked up prior to decision making. But I also think, where there is a known, or in some cases a not well known impact, i.e. an impact that might happen but we're not sure, that's something that really needs to be revisited on a regular basis after the decision is made, so that 6 months hence we understand that something we were concerned would have a negative impact hasn't had that impact, or indeed has, and it's worse than we thought, and we need to change course. So I think it would be helpful in future if, I think we're trying to encourage this through the new kind of approach to the form, if the equalities implications also spelled out, what the the review points or the revision points for a certain course of action are in the future.
And thanks for the report. Just a couple of very quick questions. You talked about monitoring and embedding the changes. Is there any headcount change in the council specifically for this work, or is this included in the existing workload?
It's included in the existing workload. Yeah.
And then you mentioned in paragraph 4.28 on page 19, second line down, the London-wide network on equalities. I was just curious as to whether there's a sort of a guideline or a roadmap for the London-wide network on equalities that we are fully putting on board, or are we doing something different from that network?
Yeah, I know there is. So I think that network doesn't itself produce guidance, but there is guidance from bodies like the LGA on equalities. And I think that is really a network designed to share best practice across local authorities or examples of good practice. But I know that in developing the Fair Action Plan, which is of course the umbrella for our kind of broader equalities work, we've been guided by both national and local government guidance about equality.
And my final question, Chair, was you mentioned culture change and sort of embedded decision making, and this is probably a sort of blue sky thinking. How do you measure culture change in this stuff, so that you can then come back in 2 years' time and say we've achieved what we haven't achieved?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. So we've got our staff survey that happens every year, and it does have specific questions around inclusion and diversity. So that could be one measure. I mean, more broadly, our people survey scores are pretty positive anyway when we look at inclusion and diversity. So trying to unpick this, I think, would be quite challenging. I think there's probably something we need to think about there in terms of how best we address that and measure it, and whether that becomes a bit of a bespoke survey to understand the positive impact this may have had or may not have had, and what recommendations we'd have to come out to that. But Joe, anything to add on that?
No, I think that's right, and I think too, though, that there are kind of, as I said at the beginning, I think there are big challenges facing the council. So some of the proof of this will be, the advice that officers give to members about about those challenges, the equalities impacts of those decisions. So if we're really giving robust advice in the spirit of these recommendations, then I think that should be clear when we present options in next year and the year on.
Yeah, just a very quick one. I mean, there are 12 recommendations here, and 4 have been implemented and 8 partial. When do you think would be the appropriate time to bring this back to this committee so we can ensure that the recommendations are actually implemented?
Yes, so I think we've got a final date of May 2027 for most or all of the recommendations, but I think it would probably be appropriate to come back to this committee in another 6 months to update on where we are, to give us a bit of time to make some further progress, but ahead of the final end point.
Do you go to scrutiny, or is this the committee you come to?
So this is the committee specifically for the audit. It's worth saying there's quite a lot of overlap between what's in the audit recommendations and what we've committed to in the Fair Action Plan. So some of the commitments around data and better use of data, and the Fair Action Plan sits within the remit of the OSC. So
Right. Just be interesting to see a copy of the form.
yes.
Absolutely. You mentioned it such a lot. It's been nice to see a copy of it. Who sits on the? We do, and I understand them. We do have a lot of boards in the council. Who sits on this board?
On the Equalities Board,
Yeah,
So that's chaired by the Chief Executive, and it has representation from across the council.
At what level are the people who sit on
Up
it?
to ED, Executive Director representation.
Yes.
And the other point you talk somewhere, and I can't find it now, of different groups within the staff networks. Well, give me an example of some of the staff networks.
So yeah, we've got the Proud Network.
Yeah.
That's one. We've also got the Women's Network. We've just established a Carers Network as well. So they too actually send a representative to the Equalities Board bi-monthly and give an update on their progress. That seems to be working well. I think that for some of the networks, they're more mature than others, so the speed of what a good network looks like, but we've got a variation of them.
And maybe next time you could bring someone from other networks, and then they can talk about what they do and how supported they feel and what impact they feel they're having.
Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, on form, You've said we'd like to see it. I'd like to see it. We'll put that as an action. Great, thank you. Second of all, the recommendation 1, which is around oversight, decision making, wasn't really clear to me for 4.2. That oversight that's there is formal enough. Now, I think, and I just want to check this out with you, that's 4.2. When I look at 4.25 with the Corporate Equalities Board, that's the oversight of this. And how do those two pieces, that's come under recommendation 11. Where do those two pieces match up? And also, does accountability look like practice?
Thanks, Councillor Simmons, and that's a really helpful question. So the Equalities Board oversees the response to recommendations of this audit, among other things. The first recommendation really around strengthening the kind of the consideration of equalities in decision making and that oversight. So that there are a couple of mechanisms for that. One is the sort of routine agenda planning that takes agenda planning meeting, which takes place across the council, which is looking ahead to key decisions or scrutiny papers, and there is a representative of my team on that group to make sure that equalities considerations are being considered alongside others like finance, HR, kind of and communications. There is also a chief executive call over meeting where the chief executive looks at decisions that are coming up, and again I sit on that board, so we try and make sure that equalities considerations are routinely taken into account. And the final step, which is new, is that there is now a role for my team in reviewing drafts of leadership team papers before they're published. So in the same way that finance would look at the finance implications or HR the HR implications, we've long had a role in reviewing EQIAs, but this is a slightly more formal role in terms of before we get to formal decision.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The other thing I wanted to suggest, Councillor Hargreaves, is that alongside the form, I wonder whether at a future update it might be helpful for the committee to look at kind of what we think is a good example of a completed EQIA, and where we think actually the officers have spelled out really clearly what the implications, known or unknown, of the decision are.
And some data.
Yes.
Some data. I mean, I don't know how easy it's tabulated.
Yeah. Just ask, are you seeing any particular director falling behind? I'm not sure if I've well enough yet.
That's a good question, because the level of change differs across the organisation. So trying to pinpoint one director, I think, is quite difficult. So in answer to the question, probably not. Actually, I can't accept that.
And then the cyber attack, are we putting that now within, is it actually throwing up more inequalities that actually we now need to look at going forward, and that we're actually going more of our residents aren't digitally enabled?
That's a really helpful challenge, and in fact we had a discussion at the Equalities Board last week about how we make sure that as part of both the kind of recovery effort and the broader rebuild of our digital infrastructure, that we are making sure again that we are routinely considering the equalities implications, so the impact of what's happened today on people and people who might have been unable to pay rent or to pay council tax, but also moving forward how we ensure that as we rebuild structure that isn't systematically excluding people.
I've got one more question. Just in terms of the purpose of the assessments, as I understand it, it's kind of twofold. It's one, we need to demonstrate that we are considering equality impacts, but also in terms of the fairer action plan, we also want to see action to be a fairer council. So this is a tool towards that aim as well. And I'm not completely clear from the report itself, maybe a little bit beyond remit, to what extent is the oversight and the monitoring that we're doing and the improved form, how is it measured that is improving fairness in decision making, rather than just giving assurance that we are considering, as the example Joanna gave about identifying inequalities but doing it anyway.
Thanks, Councillor Simmons. And I think that we are due, to bring to OSC the first annual report on the Fair Action Plan, including some measures, and I think and we made some specific commitments in that plan of where we want to see where we want to improve outcomes in a way that makes the borough fairer. And I think you're right, they're slightly separate from this, which is making sure that we are routinely considering those things and then creating a clear framework for the OSC and the public to hold us to account for the specific commitments we've made in the Fair Action Plan. We did recognise even in the Fair Action Plan that we needed to look again at the EQIA form and the approach to equality. So this audit has been really helpful.
So is there an annual report on this alone, or does it
on the Fair Action Plan?
Right, yeah. And is it given due weight in the Fair Action Plan?
Yes.
Because what doesn't come through on here is what the specifics are measuring.
Yes. Yeah.
And that will be interesting to know what are we specifically measuring.
And what we could certainly do too specifically for this audit is develop some measures that we think which will undoubtedly overlap with some of the Fair Action Plan metrics, but it will show us that we're making.
Maybe not to duplicate work, but it will be useful to see that. Any more questions, observations, thoughts?
I could say one. I'm wondering, just wondering aloud really, is there a role for AI in providing input as to equality's decision making? Because that might be part of this transformation program, but numbers don't lie.
So for me to understand your question correctly, so if we came up with an equalities impact assessment, different elements of that we want to understand more about, could we use AI as an enabler to help support us with that analysis?
That would be one way.
Yeah.
In terms of where equalities concerns have been identified, how are they turning out in practice?
We could take that way. I think we can explore that.
And presumably you're maximising the use of AI in collecting the data and analysing the data.
It's an efficiency piece,
Yeah. And I've seen examples where AI can ask very good questions about, it can challenge some of the sort of thinking, some of the data. I think, obviously we have to be aware of data that services hold, which is kind of confidential versus publicly available data like census data, which can be kind of mined. But I think we can certainly look at, I've encouraged the team, and I know that we're struggling a bit because of the capacity on cyber, but to look at a sort of digital version of the form, which is more interactive, and I don't see any reason why, certainly in the medium term, AI couldn't play a role in making that much more efficient.
But the only thing I'd add to that, because I went to a meeting yesterday where CEIPD came along and gave a talk around the future of AI and its impact to people, is around that sense checking at the very end. You don't always trust the output of AI, but you're absolutely having that individual focus on from a people lens and just making sure that what we're seeing is absolutely where it should be and accurate.
And just to reinforce your point, I think was Claire you were making earlier on, point 4.26 is bit about, we talk a lot about the things we bandy around at the council, as all organisations do, transformation, culture change, all that. We're really interested to look at how we're measuring that culture change in relation to this, how it's contributing to the culture change, and how we're measuring that. Are we actually changing, or are we saying we're changing? And then, this is going to sound wrong. Are we kidding ourselves that we're changing, or is there actually evidence to show that we're changing? And are staff seeing changes, and are our residents feeling changes? Because to talk about culture change is a massive thing, isn't it? And to bring it down to very specifics, I think, is useful. And this is a key part of that.
It's good.
Can I come in on that?
Only if you're supporting me, Claire.
I think seeing this, we've seen some culture change referred to in other reports and in briefings around cyber, for instance, and complaints and housing. What I understand it as a way of saying that some of the obstacles that officers are finding are around culture, rather than this is a sort of amorphous piece of this amorphous thing called culture change. It's actually identifying a specific obstacle, but there are culture and attitudes that present challenges to the kind of change that we all want to see. And that's how I read this, that paragraph 4.26 is kind of telling us and flagging up that this kind of fits into something that's happening across the council.
Yeah, and I think what I would just add, that I think what I would say is that we identified as the audit did, an issue with, I think, quality impact assessment and the consideration of the quality more generally being considered to main decision making, and so often it was at the completion of an EQA, not always, but sometimes it was a bit of an afterthought, and it wasn't fully integrated in the way that you described into that decision making. So in terms of if we think about kind of behaviours instead of culture, I would want to move to a situation where that's clearly no longer the case, and nobody has a problem completing an quality impact assessment because actually it's something that's been thought of right from the beginning. I don't think that makes it necessarily easier to measure, to the point Councillor Hargreaves, but I think we know what it looks like when we see it, and so encouraging those behaviours and doing what we can, and some of this I think is softer kind of work that goes on in the organisation through events for staff, through some of the work that I know Mike is often a champion of equalities in his blogs for staff, and that's that kind of information really helps staff think about these things from the beginning.
One doesn't know. I was going to test of something like this, and if you wandered around out there on a wet Tuesday afternoon at 2:30 and asked somebody at their desk, what about the equalities, whether they'd actually know what equalities meant, whether they knew there's a form, whether they knew it's filled in, and at whatever level in the organisation you go.
And if I may, just reflect on the staff survey results from last year. We asked our people to describe in 3 words what they would describe our council to be in terms of culture, and inclusive actually came out as the largest word that people actually selected, self-selected actually. So I think that speaks volumes, and diverse came out as the 2nd largest word in the world. So I think that is something just to highlight.
Good. Yeah. It's good. Okay, anything more? This paper is for discussion. I think we've discussed it. So thank you very much for being here, and I'm sure those people remaining on the committee will look forward to seeing you in due course. Thank you. Thank you. So we now move on to item number 5 on the agenda, compliance with CIPFA Financial Management Code. You're going to tell us all about our compliance, and thank you for the report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this paper is to update the committee on council compliance with CIPFA's Financial Management Code. The code sets out professional standards expected of local authorities managing their finances and acts as an indicator of an organisation's financial sustainability. It requires only that authorities meet those standards, but to demonstrate that our processes and cultures satisfy the principles of good financial management. So this year's review assesses that we remain compliant with all 17 standards across the 7 sections of the codes. 14 we've assessed as fully compliant, and the remaining 3 as compliant. So we've got no areas assessed as limited or non-compliant. So these are summarised in the table under paragraph 7.3. Just to make clear that sections and standards of the terms in the table are from the code itself. So this one talks about the council's leadership team and about management team officers rather than the former leadership team of the leader and lead members. Just to clarify that. So it's reported as self-assessment. So there could be seen as a smart code measure. It is supported by positive external assurance, which we detail in Appendix 2. So, for example, empowers relativity index ranks us first in the country. So supporting our assessment, we have high outcome managed services. Also, the recent LGA challenge peer review viewed us as financially stable with robust processes and reliable performance data. And as the committee will know, we have received consistently positive BFM audit reports from our external auditors. The most recent one coming to this committee last September. And yet, in addition, we've set a balanced budget during 26-27 under significant uncertainty with funding performance, so operational disruption or in cyber incident. So that's been a demonstrates our resilience in financial management more generally. As Appendix 2 says, we're using any reserves fund on the current expenditure, which I think demonstrates our commitment to financial sustainability. So in terms of improvements since the last review, Appendix 1 sets out the progress of these. So that's out from the work we've done around strengthening our business partnering. So this is through mainly upskilling finance staff and focusing on training there. Also, they're working on value-adding work over more transactional activity. We've also done further budget management training, delivering that to budget managers in the last year. how we can ensure a consistent level of financial capability, roles and responsibilities across the whole council. In terms of scenario planning and for our medium-term financial strategy, as I say, we've navigated the funding uncertainties, managed to forecast that the gap would be on set of arts budget, despite the draft settlement only coming out just before Christmas. Some of the actions have been delayed, as the paper says. Is largely around maximising the benefits from our new finance system. This is mainly a result of the cyber incident, just bandwidth really for that sort of thing. So we're going to roll this forward into the next review next year. All standards we've assessed being met. The review does highlight a few areas where we think we can do further improvement in particular. This is around demonstrating value for money. So although our externals have provided positive reports in this area in recent years, with the size of our budget gap over the next 3 to 5 years, we think we can still do more there around looking at BFM and our contracts and commissioning, try and drive further savings out of those. And the other two we'd like to do more on, both in financial management or internally, around the financial resilience assessment. We do a lot of scenario planning already as part of our MTFS development. We now want to look at some tools that CIFRA provide, such as their financial resilience index, which can offer externally benchmark things we can look at to compare things like our reserves and what we spend money on against other authorities and where we sit in the league table, as it were. So I think that'd be useful to look into more. And then on standard O, around monitoring our balance sheet risks. Although we do a lot of work around reserves, cash flow and treasury activity, and we could do a bit more on there. Our debtors and creditors do a bit more of a structured monitoring in departments. So that would bring finance and service departments during the year. So our plan is to bring an update on this committee later this kind of year. But yeah, thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions or further suggestions.
Thank you for this. And I think this is an encouraging report, but I think it's an important report, particularly going forward, as this council, like others, is going to be in an even stricter and tougher financial pressures. So I think this is an important report, and one that we need to, or we do see, and we need to see regularly, and make sure that we are maintaining these standards, or as you say, getting better in some areas under increased financial pressures. And I think that's going to be important going forward. So committee, Liz.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think it's it's a good report. But when I first looked at it, and I thought, we're saying basically majority of areas are fully compliant. And I know you referred to it, but we did have this major cyber attack. We couldn't even get council tax collected. I've just received 3 months. They wanted 3 months in one payment. And, there'll be some people that won't have got that money, they'll have spent it. And that's going to impact our finances going forward. But it doesn't seem to be referenced in here. And I just have a concern about that. We can say fully compliant if we've had this major cyber incident, which is well known, well publicised. And also in Appendix 1, when we look at the things from the last review, in L, we say there's backlog, but now it's fully compliant. There was nothing saying that the backlog has been cleared. And in N, you say fully compliant, when in actually last year we said the scope for further improvement in terms of bringing things together. But we've just said now, now these are fully compliant. But if we've got those points made last year, I'd like to see how they've been addressed so we're fully compliant this year. Got me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's good points there. On the on-site L, particularly around the business management program, that raise to quality in that service on that particular point. I think around the low. I think we can always do more. I think that's true and fair challenge. I don't think where it's just fully compliant. That's not that we just think, right, that's done now. We've done that. We've obviously always been looking at ways of maintaining that standard. Cyber incident, clearly a big challenge for everyone. And
I guess, correct me for the point you were making, going forward, we'd need to see some reflection of that and how we dealt with it, and what impact possibly the collecting or the late collecting council tax has had. So I think some reassurance of that. And some link, I like to put link to last year. What's happened with last year? It covers in some of the points, but I think it could be clearer in the areas you worked on.
Yes, okay, well, we'll just strengthen that and come back later in the year.
I think that, I mean, Liam did say that some of the improvements haven't happened because of the cyber attack, so there is some sort of impact there. I think the Oracle system was robust and recovered fairly quickly from the cyber attack. You're right that the Civica system, which is for revenue and benefits, didn't, and clearly it's one of the least robust systems that the council had, and it is a system that obviously relates to finance. I don't quite know that it sort of maps into this so much this year. I mean, it is likely we will collect some less income, and we'll certainly collect it more slowly as a result.
So you've got budget cuts as well. So, you know, it's going to be the financial pressures are going to,
I think our collection fund and our collection rates were very, very high. So, and so it's probably fair enough to say that robustness has enabled us, although the cyber attack has had a huge impact, I don't want to understate the impact of the cyber attack, and obviously it hasn't been easy to send out bills for free instalments, two free instalments, depending on who. For different people, it's 2 for a lot of people, 3 for some. But I think we were in a robust position before, and this reflects that. We continue to be so as long as we're able to get through this period. So I think to some extent the compliance with the code kind of reflects that we have that underlying robustness, which has allowed us, although the impact has been big, it could have been worse, I suppose.
And I guess what you're saying is next year we might see some reflection of how that robustness has been tested.
Yes,
is it as part that we were robust in collecting our council tax before the cyber attack might not necessarily carry over to how robust we are when there was a deficit of 3 months for some people.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't want to be collecting the way we are, either for last year or this year. Nobody has any doubt about that. But we are still able to collect it. We have got those bills out, and we are dealing with a backlog. I mean, in that sense, it could have been worse. And we are aware of and have communicated about the difficulties for people.
And so just
just a reflection, really. Self-assessment is all well and good, but every so often be useful to either have a peer review or an external assessment to validate. In a way, the very good result of this, everything being green.
Shades of green.
Yes, yes. Life isn't like that generally, is it? Everything right.
Yeah.
And it might be worth considering. I don't know whether there's the option to an external assessment to validate it periodically. So it's really interesting.
I think it's possible that SIP can do one on our behalf effectively. That is an option as well. I mean, as I say, we do have the event reports by our external auditors each year as well. We had the peer review last year, but can certainly consider getting SIP more involved. If
the peer review was an overall review, wasn't it? It wasn't specific to that.
It did cover
finance.
Finance. We had a review when we did the capitalisation for the compensation. That was 3 years ago.
Yeah, SIP do something.
You have to have a compulsory review then. So we had that. You're probably right. There's probably time to think about one in the next year or so. Maybe when there's been some recovery from the cyber attack, for the full recovery from the cyber attack, and Oracle's had some time to bed in, because Oracle is pretty key to the financial robustness of the council. And one of the reasons I say that Oracle, as much as the cyber attack, Oracle implementations in some councils could make a lot of these grids go amber or red, and I don't think it has. Well, it hasn't, because our Oracle implementation was very successful. And actually the system was pretty robust coming through the cyber attack. I mean, it was very robust actually, and the problems with it were the beta systems like Civica that were less robust. But there's nothing to do on IT, having said that.
Yeah, I think we all recognise the Oracle, having gone through the last, when I was on cabinet sort of 7 or 8 years ago, when we went through the last change. The Oracle has gone through incredibly smoothly, hasn't it? And that's down to the skill of the officers involved in the preparation and the project management of it. And no doubt has helped the robustness of the system through the cyber attack.
Certainly just kept in.
Yeah, I think it's a very important. I think it's something you picked up on. I think Joanna was next, and then Tara, and then your good self, sir.
I mean, I certainly have the same views about the cyber attack. I felt particularly at F on page 40 that actually we should be looking, in terms of the medium to long term financial management, the credibility of the future income stream. And so part of it is actually are the income streams coming in, and also the ability to collect, or indeed have to pay out. For example, we're going to have to pay out the GLA, and I don't know how much we're getting in. So I just felt that the right-hand column needs more meat in it, so to speak. The other challenge I noticed on page 43 going to 44, you talk about a working group that I chaired, and Claire and I both sat on. And this was that we picked the budget consultation to act as case study. We are also suggesting that could you look at how you engage residents and the public earlier in the process, so that actually we can feed it into the budget setting process, and that's not just from November to January when it's there. It's actually almost a precursor to that. It's the initial discussion which then feed into the thoughts that then go out for the consultation.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I know that we did a lot more work on it this year, between November and January, and we got a lot more responses in previous years. But I think you're right. I think we should do more over the summer. I'll speak to college and community engagement on that. Around the collection of council tax, doesn't say in this report, but we have reduced the collection rate assumed for next year from 97.5% to 96%, just to allow for a bit of resilience there. So it's a bit more. So that we normally have a budget for that, and that is still balancing the budget with that number.
That's in the budget, yes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Tara.
I was just going to say, I can't actually find the place now, but it seemed to rely on some of the kind of monitoring of budgets and savings and those sort of things relied on finance business partners. Do you have enough of those people that they seem to be quite critical of this?
Yeah, we've got a well-stocked finance business partnering team, I'd say. We created a new post last year as part of the restructure as a new assistant director for business partnering to focus on that team. And each service department then has at least 2 or 3 business partners supporting them. So
I think that's going to become increasingly important with the kind of financial constraints.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Then just the other thing was just picking up on what Andrew said. I mean, in my other life, you would be that kind of table you did would be kind of second line assurance, and third line assurance would be internal audit, and then you could have external, almost fourth line assurance. So I suppose that's another alternative. You could have internal audit looking at actually if it's considered to be kind of independent.
Very happy for that.
Good.
And the point, sorry.
So, no,
I mean, I think the point about the staffing, both in terms of finance and audit, is an important one, and there is almost pressure in every authority to reduce that staffing because of that grants being cut, because of the amount of income the council's got.
The more you need it, the less you have.
And it's incumbent upon people in my position. We actually have a statutory duty to ensure that the staffing is at the right level, but the support of I think often the support of audit committees and is also very helpful there. And I think a lot of directors and members do understand that it can be a false economy to cut back in finance areas. I mean, I would say that, obviously, but it is. I think it is very important to keep control.
And I think the fact that we are generally externally regarded as one of the better run councils, there's lots of other issues you can discuss, but in terms of how you run the council, how we budget, how we look after our money, we have a good reputation, don't we? And I think that's a reflection of obviously it is a reflection of the staff and the way the professionalism of the staff. And I certainly would be concerned in growing financial challenges if there's either the staff experience and quality and numbers was affected too severely. But wanting us to recognise there has to be a give somewhere. Councillor Yankton, you waited patiently. I hope it's worth it, sir.
Probably not, but just a very quick one, just picking up on what Andrew said. Marking the own homework bit. I think, Liam, you mentioned that SIPFA can do something with the VFM audit, which is in the peer review. Because this is all sort of shades of green, it looks like we're marking our own homework and something that's sensational. And I think Section 151 officer said that it might be possible to do sort of some form of work after the cyber and after. But this is probably the most important time to do peer review or somebody external, because this is when you're mostly under stress, you've had budgets cut, had a cyber attack, there are loads of problems. This is probably the best time someone to come in and look at us and say, are your systems robust enough so that they should all be dark green, rather than marking your own homework and then waiting for a period where it's maybe 1 or 2 years down the track. And then have a look at it then. Ask you that question because I was just a bit concerned about this sort of mark our own homework. Everything seems sensational, but we don't know whether we don't know what we don't know. And if SIPFA came in and did a test, what would they see? Grant Thornton, of course, ordered anyway with the DFM, but the peer reviews might be another council that's worse than us, and therefore they may see us as better than them. So I'm just asking, is there actually a body or organisation that can do what I would call an independent review of what we're doing?
So at the moment, as part of the savings programme for future years, we are looking at getting an external partner in to look at our budgets and what we spend our money on, to come up with things that maybe they think we can do better or more efficiently. That's more about the spend rather than the systems, I suppose. I mean, our systems generally being looked at a lot of change network now across the council. Ways of improving things post the cyber incident. In terms of timing, I suppose we'll have Grant Thornton coming in shortly to do year-end accounts, and that will do the BFM work at the same time. So that will be coming up in, I think, from June, so quite soon. We could look at getting.
There's a general feeling from the community that there's
That's just a
there is. Even being mono is bad enough. Is even worse. There is a feeling. I mean, I think people are very supportive. The community is very supportive of this report, and we know that our financial processes are generally well done. But we're picking up a little bit of not concern, but a little bit of need for more reassurance from external bodies. We have some various ones doing it in various aspects, but I think you're both agreeing that we could find somebody who could just give us a bit more reassurance. And that's in no way, from my point of view, in no way a criticism of what's happening and what's going on in this report.
I think it is just about getting the right time. I certainly wasn't suggesting 2 years. But just looking through all the headings, I don't think there are any that. So while our income might be affected by the cyber incident, our income is also affected by even more by the fact the government's cut our grant by a very considerable amount over 4 years. But the nature of this review is, are we making sure that there's an awareness of that so that we can plan actions? And I think that's where we're saying we're compliant. We're not saying that our future. We're not understating in any way the future challenges. There are future challenges, but to some extent what the code is about is saying, are we identifying those challenges? Because I'm aware of other authorities, and I'm not going to name them, but I have colleagues who've gone to work in them who are now facing financial challenges that have just come completely out of the blue. Now, I think where we are is we're saying if we don't address the issues with the Civica system that have been brought up by the cyber attack, if we don't address the reduction in grant, then we will end in that place. But it's the fact that we're identifying that and have plans to deal with that that makes us compliant, because we can't do anything about it. We can't do very much about the fact that somebody attacked our system. We can't, but we can put the fences in, but they did it, criminals did it. And we can't do very much about the fact the government has done its fair funding. We can agree with it or disagree with it, but either way they've done it. So it's really about raising those issues. And I do believe we've been good on that. I mean, we didn't. The reduction in grant was more than we expected, but as soon as it's come up, we have started making plans. And as you know, we've still managed to set a balanced budget in this year, which many councils haven't. And it's where they've not managed to set a balanced budget that they will be less green.
And I think in fairness, Mike, the committee recognises that, and I think we when we don't recognise it just now, this is a result of consistent good financial management over many years, isn't it? And
but the challenges are very real. I mean, I wouldn't want to understate the actual challenges that are.
Yeah, and I think that's why it puts more importance on this. Going forward. There was something, Claire, yes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say a few things about the value for money, which I believe is a statutory requirement for local authorities to live with best value. Now, I noticed on page 35 there is at the top, it does say that Kensington and Chelsea was ranked first overall in this independent management consultant report. Yeah. So that would seem to be quite encouraging, looking at over 200 data sets. So I hear that we're being short around value for money. Now, if that's the case, then I'm not sure that I see under the area for improvement, if we're already delivering value for money, how can we be delivering more value for money? And also, how does that assessment sit with, just off the top of my head, some examples of perhaps where value for money hasn't been great, where a person could describe it as waste or inefficiency. We had, I think, at the last meeting, a thing about Pembroke Road item, which resulted in a much larger cost than should have been. I wouldn't say that was value for money. Then we have things like the Capital Works programme in particular housing, where there have been some contractual difficulties which have led to increased cost. So I'm kind of seeing both things that seem to be true at the same time, and I'm not sure how I can square that. It seems to be that there is further efficiency that can be delivered, in which case where we are other councils even worse, or how are we being assured when there are these gaps?
No, I think the reason what we do think is extra room here for many things you've set out, we do recognise we can always do more here. So that's we look to do that, and certainly the examples you've raised. In terms of the Empower Index, that I think the methodology is published, but they effectively look at our performance and say as compared to our nearest neighbours, and then do some forward and league table based on that. So that's why it set us out first, largely compared to other councils. So that's how that's set out. But I certainly wouldn't say it's going to be our first in that, but that means that we can't do more of that value for money. So that's why we've got that only as the lighter shade of green.
And yet we are assured that we are delivering value for money. When there are examples where we haven't.
I think
I'm getting at?
we have evidence. We have some evidence, including that presented here, that we are delivering value for money. I don't think anybody's saying that it isn't dark green. So I don't think anybody's saying there aren't examples of where we could have done better. I think it is true that is true of every council, probably every organisation. So that's and we want to be absolutely top in that, but so then we're saying we are top. There is scope for improvement. That's why it's light green, but there is evidence that we are better than some others, many others.
And I read that we're better than others, but we're not necessarily perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's how
Okay.
that's how it's
And I
meant to
think
be.
your point is that probably says more about how bad other organisations are as
Well,
much
that's
as.
what I wondered, yes.
Others are actually dreading something.
You've got quite a lot of experience of other councils.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Bad, very bad examples.
So this isn't the case, but you could look at. Obviously, it's the best of it, but that's cruel in a way. But we are meeting challenges that other councils are not meeting, and we're managing those challenges. But there's room for improvement. Yeah.
And the tougher financial situation means we've got to improve. And I think, there are some councils who probably have, some of the councils with the very best financial positions may be a bit weak from value for money because they don't have to be absolutely, sharpening their pencil to the nth degree. But there's different things about value for money, aren't there? There's sort of ways, just complete ways that nobody wants and needs to be rooted out. And there's just not getting the absolute best value that you can get out there, which can be very difficult because sometimes you have to invest quite a lot to get the best value. This is sort of counterintuitive,
There's a middle one, isn't there, Mike? That actually, if something had been managed better, we wouldn't have the waste. And what we need to learn is what is better, and actually we're doing better. So a couple of examples that Claire mentioned, they weren't done intentionally, but we have identified, and the council have identified, there are some areas that actually we're not as sharp on as others.
Yeah.
And that's where the room for improvement is.
I mean, an example is the Civica system. If we have invested earlier in improving that would have cost money, but it would have been better. So it's
Okay, so I think
that
that
right, isn't it?
generally, thank you for this really good report. A couple of issues around possibly looking at external validation, and a couple of issues around following up on some of those areas there. So thank you very much, Liam, and well done on the good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So we now move on to item number 6, which is the internal audit. Please. Moira.
Thank you.
Yes.
So this is our very early draft of the internal 26-27. As in previous years, we really focused on the first quarter of the year because we're pretty confident we know what we'll do in that first quarter. But we're also outlining some areas later on in the year that we would like to cover. We are still liaising with various departments and obviously with yourselves on feedback on that. And we also discussed it at the just to sort of outline, there's 2 appendices there. One is the plan for next year. That would gradually build up over the year, and as I've described. The second appendix is a little bit more detailed. It's actually was created last year. It's a 3-year strategic plan where we try to indicate the sort of areas we will cover. And we try to link it to the council's objectives with strategic priorities. We recognise that those will change later in the year, and when we get to the point where we know if any of those have changed, then we will work that document. But it is where we are at the moment, and it gives you the opportunity to see what we could potentially audit. Ask us when we last audited. I don't necessarily be able to give you all of the answers tonight, but if there's something in there as well where you think, well, actually, I know from the risk register that this is a big risk, but I can't see it on your plan. So you doing about it, that would be really helpful.
What's useful in having members from select committees on this committee as well, because you might know areas from the area from your own select committee areas that might be working at. I mean, I guess my only any comments?
No, thank you.
There's a lot of audits there. I mean, are you confident that?
Yes, there's also
Okay, fine. I guess.
I think I can't pretend that we will always get through our audit plan, you know that. It's better to over plan than under plan, but we're still refining it a little bit. So it is potentially going to progress a little bit, but we're just putting down the areas that we feel we would like to cover. From meetings we're having with the departments, we're a little bit more focused on what we can achieve and when we can achieve it, because timing is very important, obviously, because you can't do it all in one quarter or whatever. Our main focus really is quarter one, but also getting better at using data so that we can do better audits going forward, which aren't necessarily as resource intensive because we have the data to inform us, which means we can focus on audits more appropriately. But that's a key thing is for us to get better.
Well, I highlighted that on page 59, use of data and internal and AI. Are we a leading edge council on AI?
What, it's just the audit side or was the council?
Well, I guess as a council, because what you are auditing is the impact of AI on. But so it is both really. And I think if we're not a leading edge council on AI, how do we become it, or how do we? Because it is. If we're not leading edge on it, we're not going to be getting all the great reports that we get on from Ofsted or from CQC or from all these other things.
I know that is something that is being looked at as part of savings and transformation. It's got to happen. Things got to be done more efficiently and more effectively, and making the council more informed. From an audit perspective, I think they're having this question all around the council, so we all ask the same questions. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. Yeah. We'd like to think it's an enhancement rather than a negative, but you also do need to have the human understanding about what you're actually doing with that information. So it's definitely something we're looking at. I don't know if I can answer that really.
But if we're not, who you know, look better than we do. Who are the lead? If we're not, who are? Let's get them in. And
we are looking at it. It is being looked at as part of the recovery program from the cyber attack. Really. That's the key place where we're looking at that. Again, it's something that will have to be will require investment, and you've got to work out what level you go in with it. And there are, I'm told, fantastic. I don't know that there's much in local government. I think it's more banks and people like that who are ahead of the game.
And to me, it's about thinking as much as being.
But that's where we've got to catch them to make savings.
I think I've heard that it's being used by social services, to help with case management and case recording of notes, and so that's a trial project. I think it's Mosaic. And certainly the transformation working groups have talked about looking at it more frequently.
And just being a bit provocative here, it's okay looking at it. Are we looking at global leadership here? Are we looking at, what almost with AI, isn't it? We shouldn't be looking at the next issue because that's sorted. We should be looking at the issue beyond the next issue.
I think it's quite well supported. And generally, I do know of a number of areas that do use it for different purposes. I mean, from our own perspective, we want to be better at reporting quicker, in more meaningful, succinct ways. So one way of doing that is involving the use of AI. And I use it, and my team, a number of my team use it for very specific things, and we are exploring it in a lot of detail. There's quite a lot of support also in the team on the use of AI. If you've got a project where you want to understand how you might be able to apply it to something that you do, they're very, very keen to engage with that.
It'd be really interesting for them to come along to us and reassure us as a committee that we are reassure us that we are leading edge on this in terms of local authorities, because we are leading edge on so many other areas of local authorities stuff, and we get recognised as that.
I think it's the question becoming leading edge on it, and I think it is the recovery function that you should get there. I mean, we are using it, as you say, Magic Notes. I think it's called, isn't it, in social services. We certainly use Copilot for meeting notes and so forth, but there's a lot more above that that can be done, and that's what is being looked at in terms of
Yeah, I mean, I think, Chair, it's a very important question, and I think as you recall from the previous meeting, I'm sort of helping in this kind of transitional sort of phase for the service. I think to take your first point, I will go away and see if we can do some research on it, because I'd be very keen to find out that if there's a particular council that thinks it's doing great work in this area, well, let's not reinvent the wheel. But I think within the service itself, there's already some usage of it, and it's about to have direction of travel is to use greater sort of intelligence-based work, both in the fraud and in the audit area. I know, for example, an excellent piece of work was done recently utilising sort of AI and procurement sort of bits and pieces to put together a easier manner. But I think it is something I'd like to report back to the committee in due course on.
And I think the committee would value some real, you've mentioned one there, specific examples of where we have introduced AI and what difference it's making. AI is another of those topics that are just thrown in everywhere now, isn't it? Like transformation within me. Well, it means everything or it means nothing. It means I can speak to Alexa and switch the lights on, or I can, transform our social services.
But Alexa keeps telling me she's not an AI.
So, well, there you go. Even I don't know what I'm talking about.
So we're talking about large language models which can deliver real.
Thank you, Claire. Next, please.
Thank you, Jeff. Just a couple of things. Thanks for this report. I noticed that the format of the report has changed from previous reports, which makes it a little bit confusing as to work out where we are on the strategic risk register and where we are.
Oh, sorry, that's just there for information, just so that you can.
So
Somehow, I literally put the headings in, because I obviously don't want to attach the entire strategic risk register.
of course not.
We're revising the
bringing
strategic
some-
risk register, aren't we? So
I just put those in there to try and show that we look at that, where we
do look
can,
at the
we
risk
can link
register.
the audits to something that's in the strategic risk register. We're also quite mindful that we're not happy with that format of the
it's not,
strategic
it's
risk.
not,
It's
doesn't
not
match.
strategic.
No.
So, and we're taking that away so that when it comes back in June, hopefully you see it in a much better, but we'll talk to you about.
Okay, I think that's good, because I think I'm going to keep on reiterating these points. And
We need
also,
to get
your strategic audit plan doesn't tie with the risk register. There's nothing in the risk
Yeah,
register.
it's very
about
hard to do
internal
that.
audit. It's all going to tie together.
Yeah.
So just to finish up my point, so if you look on page 65, you look at strategic risk number 6 and then strategic risk number 11. Number 6 is significant economic shock, which is to do with money. And number 11 is failure effectively to address the medium-term budget challenge to do with money. So you might want to go slightly upstream and say financial shocks to the council.
That's what we're saying. This needs to be.
It doesn't come out that there's been some sort of joint up thinking to sort of identify what are the, as thoroughly mentioned many times, strategic risks may not be as granular as this. And then my second point, Chair, is on page 70, where you've got information management and technology, and of course there's IT, cybersecurity, the current data breach. My sort of 2 points that I would sort of add in the internal audit going forward. We've talked a bit about consolidation of IT systems. Because one of the strategic risks under the cyber attack has been that we've got something like hundreds of IT systems, and therefore one of the things the internal audit can look to is consolidation of IT systems where we don't need so many, so that we can keep track on are we actually consolidating, so that we don't cause problems in the future. And one of the things that I think was mentioned is that different departments have independently acquired the same CRM system. So we might have 5 versions of an identical CRM system that 5 different departments have independently gone to go and get. And that seems, obviously, now that we're looking all of that within the cyber case, one of the things that the internal audit should be looking at is making sure that we consolidate our processes so that we're not duplicating multiple different things. And the final thing I'll mention is that one of the things that's come out of the cyber is that some residents can feed something on a computer system, and then a member of staff looks at the computer, then writes something down by hand, and then has to go and give it to somebody else who then puts it into a computer. So the internal audit, in my view, should be looking at where we can look at the processes that we're doing to make sure that they make sense, so that we don't have people writing onto a piece of paper from computer, giving it to somebody else who then puts it onto a computer. I mean, that would be bizarre. So those are the two things. Those are the two things that were told to us in our briefings that happen.
Yeah.
That specifically under information management technology, where we are heavily focused on process and cyber, if they get looked into. But thank you.
Like, I would like to think that we do that in the work that we look at. We are very curious as to where there is a manual intervention, because that always worries us, because there's always scope for errors and manual intervention. And when we look at processes where there is IT involved and humans, we like to understand why, because the fewer steps in something, the better with controls of it. So yeah, I'm not saying we look at everything, but when we look at things, that would be taken.
Good.
So I think it's twofold. I think one, what Councillor Yangston is referring to, I think is something that the external cyber team have come in and are looking at. So I'd hesitate to do duplication on that, and perhaps due to the length of time it takes to do the cyber recovery, this is definitely a Q4, if not beyond. But I think my other question is the size of the team. Given I understand changes in foot, just essentially what are the resources that we're going to have
an in-house team, which is relatively medium-sized for local government audits. But we also have access to 5 resources from 2 different frameworks that we use, both using very experienced auditors in the sector. So we can buy in, but obviously we have a budget. So sometimes you have to make decisions about this is a priority and what isn't a priority. Or if somebody asks for something that really isn't a priority for us, but they definitely want it, then we would ask them to fund it, to be honest, but their budget would fund it. But we have to be mindful of that. Like everywhere, there are limits on what you can spend.
Well, I'm conscious of even more restrictions, but at the same time, one doesn't want to cut off the safety check, which is what.
No, absolutely.
It's interesting that we've talked to 2 areas tonight. The SIP financial plan, this were going forward with the budget constraints, are going to become even more important in their function and what they do. And I guess the committee going forward needs to make sure that we are happy that that's been resourced properly within budget.
It would be our responsibility to bring it to your attention if we found that we were not adequately resourced. We would come straight to committee.
And if I may, as Chair, I think following on from our discussions previously on it, and I'm sure David will be able to update you with the names and whatever in due course, but we have over the last week appointed the new joint head of audit and fraud risk going forwards, and that post will be in place by the 1st of April. Equally, the new fraud manager post has also been filled this week. So that leaves us with, and Moira, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we've also put in place a temporary resource that's an experienced auditor that we've utilised from an external body in the past on a fixed contract for a period, which leads us to recruit an audit manager post and an auditor post. But otherwise, from that, we'd be fully resourced. And you'd appreciate the advantage of being in a shared service. 2 posts down sounds quite a lot, but when you're resourced to handle 3 services, you expect to have the odd vacancy, and that's the resilience that it brings to us.
And the joint is with Hampstead.
It's Westminster as well.
Then Sandra?
Well, you actually stole my thunder because I was going to ask that old-fashioned question, but have you got enough resource? To give them some reassurance, I'd still think, because I'm leaving the committee as well today, we need to keep quite a close eye on it, really, because I'm surprised you're not saying that you need more resource. But okay, it's reassuring you saying you've got enough resource, you've got opportunity to get in more resource. But we are facing quite a change in personnel.
Yeah.
Previously, it's a very stable team. And that's always another danger sign, as well as it's less. There's a lot of experience being lost.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's for the future.
I think it's something that the committee will need to keep a careful eye on. But it's reassuring that you are recruiting and those posts are being filled when they become vacant. So that is reassuring.
Just a very quick one, sorry to jump back in. Public health. To what extent does our internal audit look at meningitis in the universities in the borough, for example? And are you on top of those? You mentioned flex in previous times, but do you look at that sort of thing?
No, we wouldn't look at it specifically like that. I mean, obviously it's a public health function, but what we might do is look at what the function covers, and based on very large range of activities that they do cover, we would put some of them based on potentially the value or the risk. And we have done some work in public health, but it was nothing. We wouldn't get involved in something like that practice.
But we would, audits going forward would see that our public health function can and is prepared for outbreaks, not specific, but does it have the capacity to deal with an outbreak?
Most of the work we've done in the past has either been looking at how funding is used or specific contracts that they may have in place to deliver certain public health services, because they can be quite expensive, and we need to be sure that we're spending the money on it. That's where we tend to spend.
Yeah, my concern would be: are they adequately resourced and structured to be able to deal with an outbreak?
Yeah.
Today it might be meningitis, tomorrow it might be something else.
They obviously have a risk register themselves.
Yeah.
It's a shared service, which is interesting because we audit both.
So would you audit their emergency response plans, for example, which would be a process of what they do as part of your?
I would say not. It's not on my plan.
It's not on your plan, but it is a sort of thing that could be.
I think it's quite niche. I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Okay.
I mean, it is, as you say, it can be put on the plan. And I think to reflect on something that's been raised previously by the panel, this is, of course, one of those areas where, because of the COVID outbreak, there was quite a strong test of its ability to respond. And whilst I appreciate there's sort of inquiry is still going on generically in this area, I think most people probably feel that RPKC was able to respond in a number of positive ways to support residents, but it can be added to the long-term plan to look at some of these kind of issues.
I also wonder where that would sit vis-a-vis the scrutiny committee, for example, that do scrutinise public health and where there's. Okay, folks, I'm conscious. Sorry, yeah, that's the thing.
Talked about this yesterday, really brief, and that you're kind of independent of the executive in deciding which of these areas get audited, which is reassuring, because it should be the executive deciding for itself on its own. So I suppose I wanted to ask you, I think the answer is yes. If something is, say, quarter one, so we're sort of assuming these ones are going to be done, except for TBC. If for some reason it doesn't get done, will you let us know? Yeah. And obviously digital and technologists, we're a bit busy at the moment. That's something you will be keeping that in your sights for when.
Yeah, we actually need to do a plan there. We've always had a mini plan because it's so specific, and we get specialists to do that audit. And because of the timing, we could not get that plan done until each one. We're already talking to people about getting that done soon.
So you will be doing that. Thanks. I mean, for example, asbestos is in quarters 2 to 4. That did look like a rather good idea to do that. If you were getting not to do it, it'd be quite interesting to know.
So it's one of the health and safety audits in housing. Yeah. I think we're going to do 2 this year.
And so
one in quarter 1 and the other one.
So between 2, if that one got dropped, would you let us know that?
Yeah.
But you're assuming it's going to be done.
Yes, that's pretty much agreed.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. First of all, I don't think I see anywhere a planned audit around allocations.
I'm looking at Cindy, my manager. We've been trying to organise something on that at the moment. It's actually this year.
Yeah, that is going to be starting with the housing allocations.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think we're looking at that, yeah, to start the next audit year, yeah.
but we've been talking to them about
Yes,
this.
we have.
We tried to get something started this year, if I remember correctly.
Yes, it was supposed to, but I think we're going towards April start date.
It was supposed to start in March.
Yeah, it's supposed to start in March, but yeah, the brief has been agreed. But actually,
So that will appear in the next year as well.
Well, that's like if the funds, if the majority of the work starts after the quarter of March, then yes, it will be brought forward into next year's plan.
So in terms of the audit plan that we're looking at here, starting on page 60, quarter one, it's 6 to 27, which is the immediately fourth calendar year.
Yes.
I don't see allocations in there.
No, sorry,
We've got to
It's
produce
not
this at
the
some point in time. Yeah. Sorry?
It's starting the allocations.
Tell me where?
Page 70.
Oh, page 70.
On the right hand side, potential orders.
Oh, that's the strategic plan.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
strategic plan.
strategic plan, that's not the plan for work.
It's not actually in the audit plan for this coming year.
Okay, again, I think.
So I wanted, that was one point.
I think what we're saying is, wasn't that was due in this year.
Yeah.
It's not happened in this year. You didn't know when you produced a plan for next year that it wasn't going to happen in this year. So on an amended or updated plan going forward, it will appear in.
Lovely,
Is
thank
that,
you.
is that?
Yeah, thank you. And then page 64, it's hard to see, it's the one before the strategic risk list. We've got an area of growth and communities, TBC. Sorry, have you got it? It's the page immediately before the strategic risks. It's actually 64. Yeah, in the booklet. So I wanted to suggest there that the audit coverage, as well as being discussed with the service, it might be helpful to discuss with those ward councillors. And then just quickly, in terms of the strategic risks, I think Sydney began to mention this a little bit. We have some here, like number 10, number 22, and possibly number 6. These are persistent strategic risks in those 3 cases which have actually come to pass.
You say pass the plan. Yeah.
But I mean, they're revamping the strategic risk register because it is
But
really strategic.
No, but so I suppose we were asked on page, it's 2.2 at the beginning of the report. Page 53. We're to review the audit plan, strategic audit plan, consider whether it covers the persistent risk that the council faces. And I suppose I'm wondering, to put it very bluntly, what's the point if we're not mitigating the risks?
I see what I guess. I see what it's. I think it's the same point, and Sydney was making it as well. It's. I think what we need going forward, we need all these: the strategic risk register, the audit risk register, and the audit plan to all tie together.
Yeah.
So we know that that we can see on the strategic risk register how we're getting some assurance over the mitigation and thing. And the heading should be the same, and they're working on this to consolidate. To me, this is not a strategic risk register; it's a list of risks. So it's that is being worked on, but that's what we're pushing for.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
you're right.
I think
So we can follow it through.
We'll follow it through.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just conscious there on time. So this report was for information. I think we've done it justice, and you've got some ideas to go away and follow up on that. And I guess the next version next year we will see will be an amended version of what's in here, in light of allocations and other things that no doubt will come forward.
Yes,
Great, lovely. Thank you very much indeed. So can we now go on to item number 7, please? Which was your supplementary report on the response to the external review of the Council Resilience Function. And anything you're coming to join us this side. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for this, Nitin. I think we had some confusion last night a little bit on the front cover of understanding and just clarifying our mind. This was a report that went to the leadership team in October last year.
Yes.
So it wasn't written for our committee, and it is now a few months out of date. It was due to come to us in January, wasn't it? And for whatever reason, we had to delay that. So
It was delayed because of the cyber attack.
yeah. So that puts the report into a degree of context, doesn't it? But over to you, particularly.
So I focus on the resilience review. I commissioned the resilience review in December 2024. And that was soon after the publishing of the Grenfell Phase In report in September 4th, 2024 as well. So I invited Dr. Sean Ruth in. Dr. Sean Ruth is our external resilience expert for London councils, and he supports lots of councils, etc., around resilience. And he also is the author of the resilience standards for London, and London framework that we all work to. So quite a credible expert in this area of emergency planning. So he undertook this kind of quite a long review, 6 weeks. And he came up with 13 recommendations. His report was actually quite positive, but focused on more development areas. It looks like we should do that. So his report was broadly quite positive about resilience. Obviously, I invited him to focus on resilience, but he has kind of gone into other areas. But I was happy with that, and we met lots of people. And spoke to internal officers, external stakeholders, police, fire, ambulance, Facebook, etc., and council as well. So if I just, so I won't go through all 14 recommendations.
So appendix 1 we're on really now, are we?
Sorry?
Appendix 1. That's the
Yes, it's the actual key decision I'm focusing on.
yeah.
Right?
Okay. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, if I kind of verbally summarise rather than go by paragraph, is that right? So there's 13, 14 kind of recommendations, and I've kind of regrouped them in 3 cross-cutting areas, if that helps. So first one is one of his recommendations focuses on capacity and kind of the burden of a key individual. So he talks about the community resilience officer having too many areas to focus on. He actually focuses on me as well, because I feature on different parts of the agency role. So I'm actually on call today as well. So hopefully that phone doesn't go off while I'm talking to you. So there's something about looking at some of the burdens of different individuals on the rotor. Now we have one of the strongest emergency rotors in London. We have 260 staff on it. We have 30 staff on call any one time, every day, even Christmas Day as well. So any one time we have 30 people on call. This is in addition to our other kind of pools of staff that we have access to. So we have access to emergency social workers, we have access to 30 rest centre officers who live in the borough, around the borough. And we also have access to a list of staff who live in the borough. So there's additional kind of ancillary structures, but we focus on the rota. I don't believe how much effort goes into managing rota with that size.
Yeah.
So that's that. And he was actually quite impressed with the staffing, the training. But the second kind of bunch of recommendations was just better cross-council integration. So linking community resilience more with the departments. And I was actually starting a project on this, but then the cyber attack happened. So I have paused that, and I apologise for that, but that has paused. And the business continuity was also mentioned as an area where we just need to get better engagement and integration across departments. And housing as well, so closer working between the housing department and on resilience. And then the third bunch of recommendations was on operations. So it was a kind of low-level, tactical, practical, logistical improvements, like scenario planning and exercises, or and more relevant training, more kind of formal handovers between staff on the road. So really operational emergency planning type stuff. A lot of we've actually done. So, for example, in last September, we held a major counter-terrorism exercise in the small hall. That was after the report was published. A couple of weeks ago, we had a kind of a large rest centre exercise in the Great Hall. 150 people attended that. So we have done stuff from here. I just haven't produced a report to say we've done all of that. And lots of work is happening. So those are the 3 kind of
Just to do the three buckets again.
So the first one was capacity and burden on key staff
Right.
on the rota. Second was more integration between departments, more cross-council integration. And the third was more practical operational improvements in resilience. And those three have covered the 14 recommendations. So I've grouped them together. So we've got a lot of them.
Good. So quite a long report here.
Yeah.
Remember, there's a timing function, a timing issue. on
Yes, this was
report.
last year.
Of course, talking about resilience, it was written before.
Yes,
the
yes,
cyber
it was
attacks,
before.
So this report went to which scrutiny committee?
Didn't it went to
Leadership team.
But it says at the beginning. Recommendations, the scrutiny committee asked to consider the attached report.
I think it's a typo, councillor.
So is that the audit?
It's a typo. I think it's just a typo, councillor. It was written in my absence because I was on holiday.
So what should it say?
Committee.
Audit and Transparency Committee.
Us. We are.
It's just an error, councillor.
Great.
And
That's what I'm saying.
there's another typo on it on purpose, the very start, purpose, para 2 in October 2026. That should read October
Yes,
2020.
The report was in my, I was away on holiday.
Okay, so a lot in this. I don't know really that we're going to do it justice tonight, but then the leadership team have looked at it, and I guess we can touch on specific issues. But remember, this is not our report. But I'd be more interested about how we as a committee, what our function is in all of this, and how we follow up on all of this. In terms of what we do versus what the leadership team may do, or what individual scrutiny committees might do, and what you would expect from this committee in terms of our role. Councillor Gardner.
Certainly, my initial reaction when I read this was, why has it come to us so late? And the second question to that is actually, is it this committee or is it OSC? Because I genuinely felt it should not have sat between query if it should have actually gone to a scrutiny committee before it goes to leadership, which is the usual route we go down. But I felt it sort of fallen through the cracks. And I think the chairman reminded me that actually we call for it because it had come up on a report. We call for it to this committee. So I kind of look at that as a general framework that I feel it's not sure this is the right committee for it, but it definitely needed scrutiny. So
we asked for it, and I guess my point really then is, is it just interesting, and do we as a committee have any role in this report area? Do you want us to have any role in it, or do you feel you're being covered in all the other committees? And
being covered by OSC, I did. We were happy with that.
Okay. So it does say here quite clearly, we have to decide whether the committee wishes to make any comments or recommendations to the leadership team about the attached report. I'm understanding from the introduction that this has already gone to leadership team.
Yes.
It's already been approved. But nevertheless, we may wish to make comments or recommendations, which and in that regard, I have a couple of points. First of all, this external review says that it spoke to committee chairs, scrutiny committee chairs. It didn't speak to all of them. So at least one scrutiny committee chair was not aware of any of this. It's me. Did not have the opportunity to feed into. And by the way, that scrutiny committee chair is also a member of the Grenfell community who lived through that appalling response, and currently a ward councillor for Notting Dale. So I'm just a little bit surprised why the input was not requested. And it does slightly, I think, undermine some aspects of the external review, in particular around building community resilience. Because throughout, over and over and over again, we are talking about the voluntary sector and faith groups. At no point are we talking about the RAs, resident associations. No point are we talking about the ward councillors. Both of those have an elected mandate. And instead, we're talking about voluntary sector and faith groups, which may or may not have the same sort of on the ground, day to day kind of reach. I think that's a really big gap, and it's a little bit of an insult, actually. I've written this as an insult to the Grenfell community, because what we went through from the minute I stepped out of my house, what I heard was Latin Christian Centre is open and Maxilla is open. And when I went there, this was community on the ground. And I'm just a little bit concerned and confused why the role of resident talks about listening to residents. It talks that Grenfell community is the most resilient you could wish it to be, in fact, because it was the residents on the ground who stepped up first on the night.
Okay.
So I'm a little bit surprised about that. And then the final point, just quickly, is I also don't see anything in here about preventing secondary deaths, because I think that's quite serious. And there were secondary deaths. And the external review team don't seem to have been made aware of that. And there isn't anything here about preventing it. So I would have, in the event of another mass fatality incident, I would have grave concerns about the council's ability to protect the community from those additional ongoing risks, which in the case of Grenfell led to, I'm talking medium double figures, secondary deaths.
Apologies, those two areas weren't covered, but I can reel that into any future reviews, and I can bring Sean with extended person back to look at those two areas and anything else that we've covered.
Thank you.
I mean, one of the things I picked up on reading this, Pinnakin, and it was something we are very good at, is that liaison with faith groups, with practical bodies that will provide a church hall in the event of the need of it, will provide a space. And I think you personally, I know, have done a lot of work on that. And I think I feel very confident in that and the exercise of you have done it. I think what Councillor Simmons is raising now is the next lot, the next stage and taking that wider.
Yeah.
So
it's not about wider. It's about, for instance, people being turned away from the curve would be one example. That would be the wider example. That caused a lot of distress, trauma and upset. And what I hear from residents, I've said it in the council, I'll say it again, we could almost forgive you for Grenfell. We cannot forgive what you did to us after Grenfell. That is what the residents at Nottingdale say. And I'm not seeing really anything that gives me hope in any of this. So I just want that to be noted. It may be something that I need to take up with the leadership team separately. But I mean, to not include the Nottingdale Ward councillors in the external review of what happened is, I just think it's bizarre.
Liz, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for the action plan, which I know runs to September 2026. When I went through the action plan and I went through the actual report from Ruth, I noted that a number of the recommendations in the action plan had been cut from what's actually in the full report, certain sentences, and there were separate points under each of those recommendations. I just wouldn't want to see those being lost. I mean, I think it particularly happened for recommendations 8, 9, 10 and 11. They were things cut short and taken forward to the action plan, and I wouldn't want to see those lost. And also in the report itself, there are a number of points which I thought were quite helpful. They're not recommendations, but they're things like unavailability of call staff, payment to SLOs, and humanitarian support arrangements not being very clear, all the sorts of things like that. But I'd just be concerned if we lost those because they're not taken forward in the action plan.
Yeah, I mean, there are recommendations to the council, and I think what we've agreed is that we will try our very, very best to implement nearly all of them, or meet the outcome in a slightly different way. So that's a commitment to me.
Okay.
Sure, but we won't use it for stuff.
Then on recommendation 1, page 13, where they make a recommendation to move this person into another team, and then you say we're continuing with the existing structure. It's like, well, we're not going to do that. I mean, that sort of concerned me.
Okay.
And then there's anything else? Yes, and also on page 28, we only had 99 responses out of 269 to the survey, which is quite a poor rate of response. I would have expected higher. And then on recommendation 6, we use those survey results for mapping. It's a very low result.
So where's this going now, and what's happening to it after it, not after us, but after the leadership team? Because there's a few issues raised there that we need to capture.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still in the middle of the cyber response at the moment, so is the resilience team. I think the next report will be through the annual resilience report, which is the annual resilience report, which will go to the leadership team and go through various channels first. I think that's the best vehicle for reporting on progress against the agreed recommendations from the resilience review. So,
and Mr. Chair, does that come back? Does that go to OSC or does it come back here? Because
I think the back here is with OSC probably. And then
I think we need continuity, and I think I think there's a challenge for whether this paper should be on the OSC agenda.
Yeah.
With all the other questions.
All right.
So I think I've probably concentrated most on your sort of third basket, which is the sort of practical things. And there were three that caught my eye that I thought you really do need to do these. Now, it sounds like two of them you have sort of done. One was the large multi-agency live exercises. It sounds you've got a programme with that, haven't you?
Yes,
you've done some.
That was the counter-terrorism exercise.
And you do some more on for other things, I presume.
Sorry.
You'll do some more for other types of.
Yes, yeah, we've got more exercises.
Yeah. And then the other one was number 10, accelerating to strengthen the Council for preparedness for potential cyber attacks. But obviously, it's sort of this was written before you had it, so we've done that now.
Yeah.
But then the one that I think probably is outstanding that I thought was really important was the business continuities from plans from external suppliers. That's one that certainly kind of in other
That's the most
areas is
area
really
now,
important, and so I'm
Yes.
very interested to hear what progress you've made on that.
We are going to review all our business continuity plans, especially linkages and relationships to external partners. That work hasn't started yet because we've been quite focused on the cyber.
See that,
response and we're now underway. But cybersecurity, business continuity, and exercising are big areas for us. The exercising is continuing. We've had 2 exercises since then. But the other areas I get is the work.
And supply chains become even more important, which is a new geopolitical.
Yeah.
I think a lot of means that your supply chain is sometimes a bit of state.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one. On page 15, paragraph 8, I think a few of the members have touched on this. Just reading it says the recent review of effectiveness of the Audit Committee identified the need for an annual joint meeting between the chair of this committee, Audit and Transparency, and the chair of OSC. So I'm just trying to understand whether 2 individuals review this resilience plan and then it doesn't come to any more committees, or are you suggesting something different? Because it's not clear what you're saying.
So these recommendations are from the reviewer. He made them, and I think I've asked David Hughes to kind of take this forward and kind of come up with a solution to that item. So can I come back to you on that?
Sure.
Better answer.
Because I think if the resilience and review of effectiveness comes both to the Audit Committee and to the OSC, the committees can deal with it in full. But this applies, seems to imply that it isn't the committees in full, it's 2 chairs get together.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Can I come back to you?
So all of this is on OSC and it's not come to OSC.
Right, okay. I actually think we can pick this up after, but I think this is OSC rather than us, isn't it? I'm not saying we it's not interesting to look at, but when you look at what committees have to look at, and who takes responsibility and the lead for it, what happens to what we've discussed tonight versus what happens to what OSC have discussed versus what happens to what leadership has did. And there's a danger everybody's discussing it and nobody's taking the lead on it. So
is it audit or is it transparency? And if it's kind of not fitting into those,
good point,
scrutinize.
But it's been great to see you though.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I just ask one other question. On page 17 and 11, you talk about community resilient task force. Now, I appreciate this was in response to the Grenfell inquiry, but it is talking about resilience, I presume, borough-wide.
Yes.
So are you looking at having, for example, a North Kensington resilience team, community resilience task force? And for example, where we've got more of our council housing in Wales End and Chelsea, or are you looking
There's
at
an office and task force to improve councils community resilience, but working in conjunction with BCS and trade groups. I think that's what Sean.
Borough-wide.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Sean was getting at.
we see community resilience and okay, sorry, for some reason I read that with obviously with residents. Sorry, my mistake.
Okay, Pennington, so where does that leave us with this committee?
I'll note down all your suggestions and actions. I'll
Yeah.
try to integrate it into my planning.
Yeah,
I will, once I'm out of the cyber recovery
Yeah.
space, I'm very much in it at the moment. I will get a report for to OSC, and then I'll send it back to the to look at that.
thank you for that. Thank you for being
Yes,
here tonight.
and we'll have a conversation.
About the two things you raised. Yeah.
Good. Can I then put us on to item number 8, action tracker and forward programme?
On the action tracker, I think there were some cross references that are out in the minutes, and also some of the headings are out.
Right, I need to
So some of the numbering in the action tracker is out, and also certain of the headings.
Yeah.
I was
You've got that,
saying, yeah, that there's quite a few anonymous in there. I don't know if you want us to do it offline and update it, restart it later.
I think they do it offline, yes.
There's quite a few.
There's way in on that. I think that there's quite a few anomalies on here that need
Yeah.
addressing.
Yeah.
It's probably better it's done offline and then we send a clean copy
Yeah.
out. And well, it's with the hard comment. Is this there's lack of resource?
There's probably been rough edges in these papers, and I don't know who's responsible to making sure that the papers are actually tied up.
Usually the governance officer, but that depends on how much time I get to amend them, how much time before they get published.
So it's not internal audit. No, so it's governance. Okay.
Yeah, I think we need the perhaps some in the new municipal cycle to look at the timing of papers. This stuff does come to us a little bit. I know it's always an issue with committees, OSC, scrutiny, this. And I know officers are constantly preparing papers for committees, and sometimes you wonder whether they do how they do their job when they're trying to prepare all these papers. But when we receive papers like this, and I know it wasn't our paper, but if we're not expected to at least go through it, then when we received it on Thursday, Friday,
I think there was also because the last meeting we weren't at, where you said there was somebody else,
okay.
and there was a bit of a misunderstanding. We didn't see the minutes until you shared them with us.
Okay, so it's not a, we don't want to point fingers, but
No,
we just need a, we need
a.
a.
It didn't quite bear.
Yeah.
Can I just ask something? I appreciate we've got councillors who are changing, and every year when it comes to the audit, there's how many councillors have filled in their declarations and their forms. And I wonder whether we ought to be doing that ahead of the elections in order to get everybody's response back in. Because I remember after the last election, there was a big gap with councillors who hadn't filled in their declarations.
Yeah.
Is that again? Because my thinking is, maybe I misheard it. How can we do it when we don't know who's going to be elected?
No. Before people they have to do it in respect of the
Outgo or the existing.
yes,
For the year we've had.
for the financial year, yes, for the municipal.
Yes.
And so they need to fill in their forms.
So councillors leaving and or losing their seat will have had 2 months of.
I think there's a form to be filled in, and I think it's don't leave it.
Don't leave it till they've gone.
Yeah,
Get it back.
Get it out.
Our estimates won't be complete.
Ask people to complete
This
it.
is where the transparency committee.
Otherwise get it out. between April the the end of. I'll leave that one with you.
Yeah.
Yes. Something's wrong on timing, otherwise I'll take personally.
Okay.
Gap between the end of the financial year and the election.
Yes.
Then.
Is that period in that? Yeah. Okay, any other issues on the action track of forward programs? Good, thank you very much. Forward program, any issues on that? I think we're into a bit of an unknown, aren't we, in terms of whether anybody will be on it, who's going to be on the committee going forward. So, okay, so as this is our last meeting, can I formally thank all members of the committee for the hard work we've all been on it. Tori, you came on midway through, didn't you? But for the last 4 years, and thank you for the way you contributed to this committee and the way you've raised the issues and questions. So I would like to thank you for that, and thank you for the officers who regularly come to our meetings. I think you've probably been to everyone. Regularly come to our meetings, supplied us with papers and helped answer questions. So thank you all very much. And with that, I close the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for your chairmanship.
You've been really good.
Really good chair. Thank you.
We will return the copy.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to our officers here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Joseph is not going to be clerk in this meeting going forward. This and Holly is going. So you're welcome.
Well, thanks, Yusuf, for all your work.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,